Get the glass.
That's cool on data. Who's that? That warm this dude?
Get this. Get that. No. You need that. What is it?
See that whacker.
Sit. The workshop fees. Okay. Perfect. All right. Good to go. Ready? Good evening and welcome to the City of Roswell Mayor and City Council work session of Monday, December the 9th, 2024. I am Mayor Kurt Wilson. I'd like to acknowledge my colleagues and council members present. Councilmember Sarah Beeson, Councilmember Christine Hall, Councilmember Lee Hills, Councilmember David Johnson, Councilmember William Hortland, and Councilmember Alan Sells. Also in attendance for tonight's work session are our City Administrator, Mr. Randy Nyman, our Chief Legal Officer and City Attorney, Mr. David Davidson, and our City Clerk, Ms. Nancy Clark. This is a work session and not a committee meeting or a council meeting. Work sessions are run by the mayor, and tonight we have several topics to present, all of which I'm very excited about. Those 5 topics are the fire response analysis presentation, proposed fire department fees, proposed community development department fees, proposed environmental/public works department fees, and the parking plan analysis discussion. So first of tonight's work session is our esteemed Fire Chief, Mr. Joe Panino, for the fire response analysis presentation. I have seen this and I can't wait to share this with the rest of the city and my fellow colleagues. Joe?
Mayor, it's Dr.
Forgive me, sir. He doesn't have PhD on here. I apologize once again.
So we are very excited to be here tonight to present this analysis. We appreciate your patience, but with $52 million in public safety bond money, we want to make sure that we get this right, and we make sure that we don't take any shortcuts and just put fire stations where they were before. We'll make sure that we do an in-depth analysis and make sure that the fire stations are going to serve the city of Roswell for decades to come. To that end, I'm going to turn it over to our fire data manager, Alex Thames. And to give you a little background about him, he's got a Master's of Science in Fire and Emergency Management from Oklahoma State University. He's got a Bachelor's of Arts in Geography, specializing in geotechnology and GIS. He's one of only 11 individuals in the country credentialed by the Center for Public Safety Excellence as a fire and emergency services analyst. He's also certified in geographic informational systems as well. Before becoming a business analyst at Gwinnett Fire, which is where we got him from, he was a project manager for special projects at one of the leading fire service analytics firms. And he's done several fire stations analysis. So the city's in good hands with him. He does phenomenal work. Without further ado, I'll turn it over to him to give you the results of his work.
Thank you, Chief. Mayor, council members, thank you for the opportunity to speak today. We're excited to share the results of our analysis with you today. We're going to start off with our recommendations and then work to explain them as we go through this presentation. They're broken up into immediate, short, and medium to long-term steps. The first immediate term is to implement traffic preemption on all existing and future traffic lights in the city of Roswell. Item number 2 is to relocate Fire Station 27 to the site at East Roswell Park. Item number 3 is to retain a portion of the city-owned Bowen and 92 site in park for Fire Station number 23. And retain the locations of Fire Stations 21 located here in downtown Roswell, Fire Station 24 in East Roswell, Fire Station 26 in the far north part of the city. In the short term, we're recommending that Fire Station 23 be relocated to that site that station is currently at Lake Charles or St. Charles, and Jones Road. Relocate Fire Station 22 to the area of State Route 9 and Holcomb Bridge. Fire Station 22 is in the middle of the city at the moment. And then in the medium to long term, Fire Station 25 is recommended to move towards Hembry Road and House Road, so west. It's currently located next to the hospital. About the analysis model, and on the left-hand side, you're going to see the map with the final station configuration recommendations for you. The lighter the colors, the lower the travel times. The darker the colors, the greater the travel times, The model itself is using a proven facility optimization approach, but with a novel fire service data set designed specifically for this city's fire department and how we operate fire apparatus. The model is designed to optimize facilities and locations that improve services to the most addresses in the city. We're out to provide the most coverage to the entirety of the city as best we can. The data set is a product of collaboration with RDOT and the city's GIS division to ensure accurate data frameworks, such as using real traffic data. We used transportation streetlight software to identify peak traffic times and speeds. And we also included realistic considerations for fire apparatus travel. Those behaviors include turning, braking, how we accelerate in a fire truck. It's different than most other vehicles, and we operate in traffic differently. So we had to really focus on these assumptions. The model's accuracy was validated against RFD data and aligned well with the 2021 CPSM gap analysis findings. We did a lot of work to validate our process and make sure that we were accurate with our model here. Lastly, the data set was also adapted to model the impacts of intelligent traffic preemption systems, and compared against the results of neighboring cities who use this system, our results were extremely accurate, so we're very confident in what we're about to do today. Some outcomes to consider. 4-minute travel time is the gold standard. It is our benchmark target to perform against. And to explain travel time briefly, a travel time is from when a fire truck rolls out of its apparatus bay at the fire station to when it arrives at a fire scene. So for us, we're really focusing today, when it comes to fire station placement, on that interval of time. But travel time is part of a greater response process that I will walk you through for a moment. The response starts before anyone at the city is ever called. It's the pre-dispatch phase. In that phase, someone is having a medical emergency, a fire starts, smoke alarms might be going off, and this time varies. On average, it's about 3 minutes, but generally it varies. And that phase ends when someone picks up the phone and calls 911, and that triggers the next step, which is the call-taking time phase. That phase, which is benchmarked at about 1 minute, is when our 911 dispatchers across the street pick up the phone and ask what is the nature of your emergency, and goes all the way until they encode a fire station, the lights go off in the station, tones, and the guys get up. So to that end, it's 1 minute, and to walk you through the process of the cumulative time that we're taking here, we're benchmarking about 3 minutes in the pre-dispatch time from when the incident began. We've now added a minute to get to 4 minutes, so we're 4 minutes into the incident. The fire department has not yet been notified yet. The next step here is turnout time. This begins when those tones go off in the station, and it ends when the crews, leave the station. This is benchmarked at 1 minute and 20 seconds. In practice, this is closer to 2 minutes, and we're working towards benchmarks because we're working towards quality improvement and hitting those gold standard expectations. Turnout time is the period where our fire crews are getting in their gear. They might be getting up if it's in the middle of the night for a call. They're getting to the truck. They're getting ready to leave. In practice, as I said, this is closer to 2 minutes, and part of this station placement process is focusing on opportunities to reduce that time as well. Designing fire stations can allow us, intentionally that is, to allow us to cut those turnout times down and improve services and ultimately lower the response time to the public. The last phase is travel time. Again, when the fire crews leave that station until they get on scene, we're benchmarking 4 minutes here. Travel time is critical because it plays a substantial role in the outcomes of fire and emergency medical incidences. Utilizing that 4 minutes allows us to have a very high standard for services to the community. But at 4 minutes for travel time, with a cumulative time cost now of 9 minutes and 20 seconds, we really have to focus on cutting that travel time back. And so to give you an illustration of why this matters, the illustration on the right shows the progression of a house fire. As you can see, the red dotted line is the time period up before the fire department knows a call has happened. You can see the fire is already growing. And that black box there is the turnout time. The crews are getting in their gear and getting ready to leave for that fire. By the time we are driving to that call, the fire is already growing very substantially. And so reducing that orange box travel time is really critical for us improving those outcomes to the community. So let's take a look here at our current 7 stations. This image is of peak traffic conditions with our current stations. And to point out here, some of the circles you see are gaps that were also in that 2021 CPSM analysis. This analysis aligns with what CPSM found, and we're validated against that because we're both in alignment with those gaps. As you can see, there's gaps in East Roswell. In the middle of that circle is the proposed site for new Fire Station 27. On the southwest corner, southwest of downtown near the river, and then the northwest corner of the city south of Mountain Park. We're also in the process of this presentation going to walk you through two key statistics that we want to keep in mind here to couch this conversation. The first is 90th percentile. Our analysis model shows a 90th percentile performance time of 6 minutes and 56 seconds currently with our current fire station placement. This is without traffic preemption as well. And why we're talking about the 90th percentile here is 90th percentile performance is the preferred statistic for our department because it demonstrates the majority of the data as opposed to the middle of the data. It also is less influenced by outliers. Averages, on the other hand, you could have a low number of data or a high data point, and it will throw the number way off. So for us, using percentiles is a much better way to keep the gold standard approach and allow us to be much more clean with our data approach as well. The second point to hit on here is addresses with greater than 4-minute travel time. So along with the overall summary performance statistic, we're keeping in mind that the number of addresses that we're able to reach within 4 minutes is really, really important to improve or capture good outcomes. And so for us, we're keeping that in mind as we propose stations being moved or a traffic preemption system. Currently, we're at about 70% of addresses during peak periods where we cannot get there within 4 minutes based on the model. That equates to over 31,000 addresses. So the process here for us is not just lowering that travel time and the left with 90th percentile, but also lowering the number of addresses we can't reach within that 4-minute period. That's really important here. Moving along, we first want to talk about the value of preemption. On the left-hand side, you can see that same map on the left with our current fire stations located and without traffic preemption conditions. On the right-hand side, you can see the value of preemption with a lot brighter green and brighter colors to show that preemption can help us to get places faster because it's turning lights together. The system that is being proposed takes into account where our call is, where our fire apparatus is, and turns the lights green all the way along that path. So it has a great impact for us. To that end, part of the city does see valued improvement. The southwest corner of the city does get substantially better, but in other parts of the city, gaps where we just don't have fire stations nearby really just can't be overcome, and so we're going to address that in a different place. The cumulative takeaway here is that in the model, 18% travel time reduction on the 90th percentile score, which equates to about 1 minute on the 90th percentile. So that is a huge improvement just with traffic preemption alone. We were asked through the process of this analysis project to consider starting from scratch. What if we took a blank slate to the city and we put fire stations out there? And we did get to a 6-station model where we could see potential for performance improvement, but it is highly predicated on multiple points that I'm going to walk you through now, which are unrealistic. The first one is precise facility placement on the exact parcels selected for analysis, regardless of size or availability. We all know that's a very difficult challenge to overcome. You can see on the map on the left, the purple stars and circles are those proposed locations. The second point, it couldn't be a phased approach either. We would have to move a lot of facilities, and to incrementally do it in this case, we would actually see regression. So we'd have to do it all simultaneously, which means the capital investment of building 5 facilities all at once, then cutting over and then having that happen. The third point is it would require 5 fire stations to be relocated. And the only one here which we would identify as an existing site to retain would be Fire Station 24, the purple star just east of SR 400. Closing Fire Station 26 would also be an outcome of this, and that would compromise coverage in North Roswell. You could see that area is circled with the red circle at the top of the map. And the reason here is the model is trained to evaluate optimizing fire station location on the density of address points. That part of the city is not very dense address points. And so if we're trying to improve coverage to the overall city, the model did not see the value in placing a station up there with only 6 fire stations to have the choice from. And so that is a really key decision point for us here. The last point is it also moves a fire station out of downtown Roswell. It recommended moving a station much further south, and that leaves a coverage gap in the center of the city. That was a key takeaway as well. We did, however, have some key observations from this exercise we found valuable. First and foremost, Station 26 again. That area would be too far away from the next closest station with just 6 fire stations to receive that benchmark gold standard coverage. Another point to consider is that Milton Fire Station 41, which is that black square just to the right of Station 26, is going to relocate soon. We do have an automatic aid agreement with the City of Milton Fire Department, but they're moving that station much deeper into their city to cover more of their jurisdiction in the coming days. And so for us, if we were to move Station 26 out of our model and just have 6 stations, we wouldn't have the closest station would be marked where Station 23 would be relocated to, and that leaves a massive coverage gap in that region of the city. Some other highlights to look at is Station 24 and Station 27's planned site. You could see in the inside map where 24 is in relation to the analysis model. And Fire Station 27's planned site at East Roswell Park is very close to the existing back. This is flashing back.
I can have low battery. All of ours are flashing. There's an issue with it.
He don't, you can have the one.
All right. So with that in mind, we progressed the model where we said, okay, we're going to keep fire stations 26 and 24 in place. There's good justification for both, as well as relocating fire station 27 to that planned site in East Roswell Park. And we ran the allocation model again and said, okay, here's 4 stations. Where do they belong in the model that gives us the best coverage? What we found was some really interesting stuff. First of all, with traffic preemption included, Fire Station 21's location is validated as belonging in downtown. You can see that site is very close to its existing location in the grayed out triangle. Next point to talk about is Fire Station 23. The model consistently recommended moving that facility north. And you can see in this model, it puts it at the intersection of Hardscrabble and 92, not far from the existing city site at Low End and 92. Our recommendation is to relocate Fire Station 23 to that site. Some other iterations found that Fire Station 22 belongs moving southeast. Somewhere along Holcomb Bridge near State Route 9 is what we found consistency in the model on. And lastly, Fire Station 25 was consistently moved west on Hembry Road, away from the hospital towards the center of the city, giving it better north-south and east-west access. So the final future recommended configuration here, and again in the map on the left, you have fire stations 24, 26, and 21 retained in their current locations. You have Fire Station 27 moved north along Holcomb Bridge, and Fire Station 23 moved north to Bowen and 92 sites. That leaves stations 22 and 25 in those hatched zones. And we don't have sites, from the fire department's perspective, identified for those. We're recommending a zone to investigate further with city stakeholders to identify a good location, and we'll continue that conversation as we go. But Station 22 and 25 zones are indicated on the map. Looking at the performance chart from beginning to end, as I said, we started at a 90th percentile, 6 minutes and 56 seconds, without preemption of current station locations. We also had almost 70% of addresses with greater than 4 minutes of travel time during peak conditions. So when traffic is the worst between 4 and 10 p.m. and then 6 and 10 a.m. in the morning. When we apply these locations with traffic preemption, we see a 90th percentile of 4 minutes and 48 seconds, over 2 minutes of improvement on travel times. Travel time being fire truck leaves station, the fire truck gets to the call. And we see 20,000 addresses drop off there. We are under 25% of addresses now with a greater than 4 minute travel time to the call. So for us, that is a market improvement that we really want to pay attention to, because it means that we can get to more of the city quickly, not just meet our performance times better. Some other things to consider. We should continue with full implementation of automatic aid with relationship to CAD. This allows us to use the resources around us from other cities. We all help each other, and this in turn will also help us bring those 90th percentile points down and lower the amount of addresses with greater than 4 minutes from a fire station. We're only counting Roswell fire stations in that calculus right there. Point number 2, we're also recommending collaboration with RDOT to review traffic engineering in key areas that can improve public safety travel times. Just because we've left the station and where we place that capital asset, there are other opportunities that can help us lower that travel time in the process and improve our access across the city, and that collaboration leaves us a lot of opportunities. Lastly, the fire station placement planning was not done in a vacuum. We're keeping in mind the economic development initiatives and aligning with them to meet future needs. To that point, you can see some of those economic development initiatives circled on the map for 4 points of reference, and the TAD, which is that orange polygon overlaid on the travel times, You can see Fire Station 22's recommendation zone aligns very well with the tag, as does Fire Station 27's recommended location in East Roswell Park. Both are within the tag. And we want to point out that that could be a potential funding source for those facilities. And with that, the recommendations here today are to move forward with traffic preemption citywide, and we're seeking approval to proceed with Fire Stations 27 design and build in the future. And Chief, with that, I'd like to hand it back for any questions from council or Administrator Knight. Thank you, Chief.
That's what we got.
Well, Dr. Panino, as usual, you just haven't met the threshold of excellence. You surpassed it. Just to brag for a minute on Joe. Really, underneath Mr. Knighton's leadership, really 2.5 years, Joe seized the opportunity to really say, I want to become the best fire department in the United States. And recognizing that that was going to take a lot of innovation, adaptation, out-of-the-box thinking, and this is a perfect response, as I think the discipline showed through this process, because we've been patient, we've been disciplined, we have not hurried the process of the fire station plan, and what came out of it is outstanding work, Alex. We're very glad to have you in the city of Roswell. Thank you for your excellent work, sir. Thank you. So I know the council probably there's a lot there to consume and digest, but as you can see, preemption recommended as a significant strategy to benefit the city of Roswell and its residents and businesses. With that, any thoughts, comments, or questions from council? Councilor Johnson.
KUX. Sorry. So with Fire Station 26, in top northwest corner, beaming across, I believe that's Milton, where the old Jag comes in. Will we be able to? I don't know if there's any traffic lights there. But if you all can get to them and Milton to put this technology on their traffic light for.
Yeah, so a specific program that we're using based out of Alpharetta is what two other cities have already adopted. So there's interoperability, so we can respond to other cities and they can respond to our city and make use of that technology to reduce response times.
David, we know preemption's been out there, and some of our sister cities have been using it. We felt like we had the additional challenge to kind of start from scratch and say, let's see what, if we were to place fire stations wherever we could, what would that look like and what would that do to performance? So we kind of took more of a global approach and then came down with the obvious answer that preemption has to be part of the solution. Councilor Wardland.
One other point that you mentioned, I don't want to mess up Unit 9 means, but we just had a conversation about Unit and what landfilling systems that are going in, or we're changing them from copper wire to fiber. Should also help the time, because that's added to them.
That's right. I think anything that we can attack as a city, any portion of that overall response time is going to drive down the overall response time. So, we're excited about looking at station design. We've already made some, as we talked about Fire Station 27 design with Brian Watson, we talked about making sure that the living quarters is centralized with the apparatus bay, meaning there is no place in the fire station that is too far to get to the apparatus bay and get out of the station. So every piece of that overall response time should be attacking for sure.
That's what they added that. Well, part of the directive is, as you know, my grandfather passed away, was a firefighter that passed away at 39. So one of Joe's mission is one, obviously, to potentially address longevity of life and quality of life for firefighters. That is one issue that's being addressed. The other issue that's being addressed from the human procurement side, on the economic development side, is creating apparatus in the fire station itself that benefits performance of the firefighter. To that point, all those issues are going to be also addressing time. As you can see by the chart that Alex showed earlier, time is, it can be a savior or it could be a killer in this business. And so, to your point, there are a lot of areas to address. But travel time is one that we can take under control under this plan immediately. It has a significant impact that will benefit our residents and our businesses. Councilor Gillis.
Thank you, Mayor. Let's see, where should I start? When I came into office, I was the public safety liaison, so I got an up close and personal indoctrination to fire and police, which was great. And I had the opportunity to ride along with the chief of staff, Mr. Gazzetti. He brought along this mayor, and we rode in a vehicle behind an engine. It was a truck that had the device in it that triggered the intersections. And when I was hearing about it, I thought, I'm envisioning, because I'm simple, I'm envisioning, safety patrol people with a whistle stopping every intersection to get our fire apparatus through. And it was so smooth, the way that the cross intersections closed down. They didn't know what was coming. They just saw an engine through it. We were following the engine that was supposed to be a fire engine. It was a pickup truck, but we were in a vehicle behind that. And it was fascinating watching people slow down because we knew what to look for on either side. So it was really kind of a neat thing, and we weren't ready. Rewinding, the previous administration wasn't ready, and I know me and you, Chief Benino, many times, we were asking questions. How is this going to work? Are we covered? Do we have what we need? And you would whip out all sorts of data and explain in great detail with proofs on how it could work and why it should be implemented. And certainly we jumped right on it and started transitioning to a full-time fire department, and we're all grown up now, still a few more benchmarks to hit, but this makes perfect sense to roll right into this now and have it in support of our entire council and mayor and our staff and frankly our residents first, to make sure that we can deliver the best response time possible, and to look at this from what I think the mayor might coin a zero-based approach, starting from scratch on how we would put and where we would put fire stations. So I love it. Thank you for all the breakout on this. I didn't have a good understanding. I read through this earlier today, but hearing it from you was really good, Mr. Tim. So thank you. Love it.
Yeah, Lee, you were an early adopter of preemption. I got to see it firsthand early.
Yeah, I was looking back. Here we are.
Here we are. Councilor Sells.
Okay.
2 years. 1 and 2.
Great job. This is, I didn't see this great.
It was a lake.
Good sign. Thank you. Well, I feel bad because I'm going to ask a question I probably should know the answer to. And I'm sure you said it. How many fire stations are we saying we're going to build in this plan? What's the total count of fire stations we will build that we? Yeah.
So the recommendation is to relocate Station 27, so that's one. And then Station 23, moving it to Bowen and 92, that's 2. And those are the immediate to short term. And then relocate a fire station 22 towards Holcomb Ridge Road at 9. That's short to mid-term. And then medium to long term is moving fire station 25 west on Henry Road. But that's more of a long term. So that's 4.
When you say long-term, what do you think in terms of?
I would say when that station's ready to be replaced. It's still in pretty good shape. Unfortunately, the issue with it is it sits too close to the border about forever. Right. So that's why the model wants to bring it into closer to the center of the city.
And I'm sorry, I probably know this too, but what was the original, in the bond roadshow, what did we think we were going to build?
8 fire stations.
So net 4 ahead.
Yeah, I mean, and the operating costs as well. So I mean, that's, there has been a lot of conversation about how many stations we need. Is it 8? Is it 6? And, we've been trying to be pretty purposeful at saying, let's make sure that we have the data. Let's look at all angles of this. I want to be very purposeful of how we proceed to make sure that we get it right. Always, don't rebuild stations where they already exist and not take into consideration future growth or where the growth's going to happen. And then Alex had quite a tall feat ahead of him because nobody's modeled traffic preemption with fire station results at the same time. He did a lot of work And that's where the patients came in with our GIS network, with our GIS team, and creating that novel approach, which is how long does it take a fire station to break? How long, or a fire engine to break? How long does it take it to make a right turn? What if preemption's at that traffic light? Then how does that change? And that takes a lot of work in programming, and then taking all of that and then backing into our historical performance to double check it and make sure that the model is accurate. So just hats off to Anne. So much work for sure.
And the preemption process, does that work with existing technology at the Light and Fox, or is there the overbuild? And if so, what's the time frame on the preemption process? I assume you're going to start that well before any fire stations, right? That will first move.
Yeah, so Brian Watson, they'll talk a little bit more about that, but they're talking about within like 6 months starting to, with the installs happen. An install has to happen in each intersection, and also technology has to be installed on each fire truck. So yeah, that is a near-term, short-term thing to get that up high.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, and Alec, one of the reasons we're bringing this to you tonight for consideration in today's work session was literally preemption saves lives, and getting this into the system and getting it on tonight's docket is, I thought, was paramount. And like every day we don't do it is a day that we potentially put somebody's life at risk. So under the leadership of Joe, Mr. Knight, he said, let's move it forward and advance it and do the presentation and then take it straight to the city council tonight. 2 other things, just going to add to this. This is also a story about technology and the city adapting and using technology a different way. And one of the things that I think that's like really innovative and thinking differently that Joe has brought to this is, having, like in the military, sometimes there's a misnomer and you've seen a change in strategy about size of force and the execution of the mission. And this is a perfect example. Historically, if you would look at local governments, one is they would often make decisions about placement of assets, i.e. fire stations, based upon rebuildability and cost of land. Not the first priority of the mission, right? Second is they would often fall into the more fits all category as the solution. And as Alex's data shows, that in fact is not the case. So it's really kind of create a very streamlined, data-driven approach for the best solution. Just extremely well done. Yes, ma'am. Councilor Beatty.
First and foremost, analysis, data, and technology. Oh my, it's all my favorite things combined into one, and I'm very excited to have Alex join us here at Roswell Fire Department. That was an investment that was led by Dr. Chief. The Dr. Chief, I think, is important in that situation because he typically takes a data-forward approach with a lot of decisions that he's made on behalf of Roswell Fire Department. Bringing somebody in who can exclusively do that analysis, not only you have somebody who can really dig into the data, but honestly, you have me at 90th percentile on the data. I boo to some averages. I don't do medians, I don't do averages. You going off of the percentile approach right off the bat goes to show the level of analysis that was done. And as opposed to taking a shotgun approach, which is typically how cities naturally grow, where it's, oh, well, we need a fire station here, and now we need a fire station over here. This has given us an opportunity under the leadership of Mayor Wilson to be able to take a 30,000 foot reanalysis and really determine what's the best way to approach this using these bond dollars as well. That begs my only question. Could you go to the final slide before questions, which is the next steps or the recommendations for this evening? Sorry.
Yeah.
I brought you from the beginning of the slide deck to the very end of the slide deck. It's a grand tour.
Council.
Perfect, thank you. So looking at this, you have the traffic preemption amount not to exceed $733,535 and a budget amendment. So for clarity, that $733,535, that is not coming out of bond dollars, that is coming out of general fund due to the fact that it's a budget amendment? Or is it coming out of a budget amendment for this fiscal year that's only going to be around for a couple more weeks and it's going to be reimbursed with bond dollars? Sorry, Brian.
We were going to talk about this in your council, but it's okay. So the $733,535.20 is the total cost for a 5-year agreement with the company that we're going to go with. So that includes the equipment as well as the connectivity for a 5-year period. The 281,580 is the connectivity portion of that 733,000. That's going to be coming out of general fund. The remaining amount is going to come out of the bond dollars, because the bond dollars cannot pay for the connectivity.
That's what I was wondering.
So-
So I knew there's some things you cannot spend bond dollars on.
So
Okay.
again, so the 733 is a 5-year for all 106 signalized intersections, 24 vehicles. 281 is coming out of the general fund, and the difference, which I can't do the quick math on that, is going to come out of the bonds.
Perfect. That explains it. Thank you.
Sarah, thank you for your kind words. And just to be clear, the $281,580 is coming out of the current 20.
The 6 month.
That's right, coming out of your budget right now. It's not coming out of your 25 budget, because I know that budget presentation is coming.
I get real confused anytime we get into the end of budget discussions, but we're also talking budget discussions, so just making sure.
Yeah, so that 281 is going to be in your 6-month current budget.
Tonight, but you, before the comes before.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Christine, also, you go.
I just want to thank you. This has been a long time coming. Thank you so much. I mean, can't wait till this is implemented. And just a question on the implementation. I know we're going to move forward quickly. Will it be done within 4 months or
And let's call it, Brian, what's you got? 6 months.
6 months? Okay, thank you.
By June of 2025. And preemption should be fully in place across the city.
We will have some of those signalized intersections up and running by June of 2025. What's closest to your house?
Alan, that's one thing that's been demonstrated, it definitely doesn't work.
Just look at your back. Squiggle on your back.
That's right, just look at pavement, or the deck. Brian, let's give everybody a completion date on preemption in 2025. Don't look at me that way, Joe.
I have a question. The thing you get you.
Okay, so this was, again, part of the, we won't have to do it this afternoon or this evening. So it's a 10 to 12 week time to get the equipment. We then have to make sure that we've worked with GDOT because for we have the GDOT boxes, we have to make sure that they approve of that. And then it's within a day, we'll be able to get per signalized intersection. It just takes time. So we have to coordinate it with RDOT, we have to coordinate it with GDOT. We just have to make sure that we have all, so as soon as we can, we're trying to give a little flexibility there. So we're saying 6 months. I would love it to be done under that, but some of it's going to be based on just availability of staff and how we're going to coordinate that with the various entities that need to be involved. So
June of 2025.
we will have some of our signalized intersections ready with traffic preemption by June of 2025.
Let's get a hard date for everybody.
Yeah, and as soon as we get this, then we'll be able to place the order, which is going to be tonight, and then we'll have a better idea of the when we'll get the equipment. We'll be able to coordinate with RDOT.
Work. Thanks, Ann. Right. Yes, sir.
Chief, thank you. Alex, thank you. Well done. Appreciate your fantastic work for the city. Thank you, sir. All right, the next item on the work, any other questions or comments on the first item? The next item is proposed fire department fees, also by the April mentioned Dr. Joe Benito, and a special guest. We'll go let him introduce.
My special guest is Division Chief of Community Risk Reduction, Brian Wolf, also from Gwinnett. Also been with the city for 30 years. 30 years, yeah. This kind of goes along with the efficiencies and innovations that we've tried to put in place in the Community Risk Reduction Division. As you remember, it's probably been almost 2 years now. We've came before this mayor and council for the Crywell fire alarm program, as well as the compliance engine, which is a third-party company that made sure that all the fire alarm systems and fire suppression systems in our businesses are checked and maintained. And we've done a lot of work in monitoring that. And we've actually seen a 20% reduction in fire alarms since that implementation. And credit goes to this mayor and council, and also to Chief Wolf, who has been kind of on top of that, making sure that if we get repeat false alarms, we send somebody out to talk with the management of the facility or whatever that is to make sure that the stuff's getting fixed, not just relying on the Crywell program. We've also implemented a tiered inspection program. meaning a lot of cities around us will just inspect every occupancy in the city every year. And that's great if that's something that you want to do, but we've taken a strategic approach based on hazards and risk classification. So if we have an occupancy in the city that we would consider real low risk to life or property, that facility gets inspected every 3 years. And then 2 years if it's a medium risk, or if it's a high risk, we make sure that we send someone out there once a year. But that is being very strategic at how we deploy our resources and making sure that there's not waste or overuse of resources in our system. This is just the next step, the next iteration on things that we're looking to do in the Community Risk Reduction Division, specifically to make sure that we are recouping some of the fees for the services that we provide to the businesses, and making sure that the businesses are safe in the city of Roswell. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Chief Wolf for some more detail.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. So the fire department would like to implement a standalone fee schedule similar to our neighboring cities. On the screen, you'll see our proposed fire fee schedule, which is divided into plan review, inspections, permits, and fire department services. These fees align with House Bill 461, which governs regulatory fees charged by local governments, certifying that those do not serve as a source of profit. The plan review fees in the first section address those fees associated with our plan review process. Included in these fees are value-added services such as consultations and other potential ideas on the plans when speaking with developers so that their plans are submitted correctly in our first review. The inspection fees are designed to recover costs associated with performing inspections, including follow-up inspections and discussions. As Chief Anino mentioned previously, with the compliance engine, we aim to reduce the number of follow-up inspections by getting the businesses to be proactive with their required inspection, testing, and maintenance of items such as fire extinguishers, fire alarm systems, sprinkler systems, etc. You'll notice also in the inspections we have our follow-ups. One of the things with the compliance engine, currently we're having a pretty high rate of compliance. Our biggest offender of people, not necessarily locations, but of systems, are sprinkler systems. They represent the large majority of the systems that are not in compliance. So that requires consistent follow-up. Some of that's due to, hey, they ran into it with a forklift and caused damage, and it takes time because of supply chain issues to get their systems back in place. We'll kind of touch on that when we talk about some of the fire department services. So the permit fees are designed to cover costs of inspections due to a permit that's being issued from us, from the fire department. Food truck inspections, fireworks, pyrotechnics, and blasting permits. So with fireworks, those are your commercial events, not your July 4th backyard. So it doesn't touch the residential aspect of that. This is 3 to 4 events a year within the city, and one of them is ours. So, and then blasting permits with just general construction and other things that need to occur. Fire department services portion involves providing our personnel and apparatus for events when applicants cannot adequately provide their own safety measures, or there's significant enough hazard that demands fire department involvement. For instance, like I talked about, the sprinkler system being down, typically businesses can provide their own fire watch. They have a log that they compile, but sometimes businesses may not be able to do that, and if in working with them, they identify, listen, we can't do it for 24 hours a day. We need your assistance. That's when this would come into play. So that fire watch fee would be charged per hour per person. It takes one person. That cost recovery mainly is to incorporate the fact that we're taking one of our inspectors off the road and they're sitting there for 24 hours, so we're recouping the cost of their time and effort as well as the lost permits and inspections that are being done by that individual. So the other aspects of this is just the standby fire apparatus. It recoups not just the cost of the personnel, but also the cost of the apparatus. It kind of runs in line with some of the FEMA schedules in terms of their charges for fire apparatus, but that's where we stand with the fire department services. These fees overall were carefully developed by benchmarking against our neighboring jurisdictions, the State Fire Marshal's Office, other counties throughout the state of Georgia, specifically Cobb County, Henry County, and Liberty County. The standalone fire fee schedule aims to improve efficiency, provide clarity for applicants, and ensure the city is adequately resourced to support safe and compliant construction. The fire department and building department both have distinct fee schedules based on the nature of their services and the regulatory responsibilities. The fire department's proposed fees focus on aligning with our neighboring jurisdictions and industry standards while offering flexibility through options like tiered services or expedited services. There are two listings on there for expedited services. One's plan review and one is inspections. And they are relatively self-explanatory, in my opinion, but we can dive deeper into that if we need to. Both fire department and building department have different methodologies for calculating these fees, where we use fixed fees, per unit charges, or hourly rates for some services. The building department, mainly just the building fees, focus on a cost evaluation of the entire project. So I'm sure Michelle will be up here to explain their methodology a little bit more, but that's how our two are different. So the proposed fee schedule demonstrates a commitment to balancing our safety regulations with a business-friendly approach. It ensures adequate resources for the fire department while remaining competitive and fair. Thanks for your time, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Chief. Chief Miller, Chief Benito. Council, any thoughts, comments, or questions? Councilmember Hills.
Yes, just a clarification, and thank you for that. You mentioned something about a House bill that these fees align with, or at least cooperate with the understanding that these are not drawing profit.
Correct.
So this isn't a silent fundraiser for the fire department, right?
No.
I just wanted to make sure that that was clear. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Councilor Peace.
And just to reiterate as well, you've said this a few times, but to confirm, this is based off a model of the surrounding cities use. So this isn't us trying to create a new revenue stream that's never previously been done before. It's based off of a model that, do you have examples of the surrounding cities? I believe Alpharetta is one.
So Milton, Alpharetta, Johns Creek all have implemented their fire fee schedules. Sandy Springs has a very limited one, but they are in the process of following this approach as well.
Makes sense, in order to better utilize resources and be reimbursed for this.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Councilor Sells.
I understand what Councilmember Hill is saying, but this does cover, in other words, your model nets to zero, is that basically the
Pretty close,
objective?
pretty close.
And does it have some assumption about, the absorption or the utilization of this? And is it in keeping with past experience for us?
Yes, we looked at historical volume to come up with that, and we're not 100% cost recovery, but we're pretty close on actually providing the services.
And we had fees before, correct?
Not really with the fire department. They weren't, some of them were baked into the ComDef permitting fees, but it's a lot cleaner when we pull them out and really make sure that we're charging fees directly for the fire department services involved in plan review and permitting. Yeah, it's much cleaner.
Councilmember Hall.
Thank you, and thank you for bringing this forward. And this may be a question for our new CFO, but will the shared services, the finance through shared services be handling the fees, or how will this be logistically implemented?
So in working with IT in the implementation of the new permitting, it's a combination of working with community development, and developing those fees will be collected at the same time as the building department collects their fees.
Because they're already doing it, so it's going to integrate with that.
So it's not any additional labor or administration for your department?
Correct.
Let me address this too on a global scale. So for a year and a half, we have been working on forgive me the air quotations, a customer service model underneath the leadership of Deputy City Administrator Jeff Leatherman, who's probably in the room. And what we want to do is we hope to launch that in this first half of 2025, or perhaps even the first quarter. And we call it customer service, but as Mr. Knight directed today, it's going to be called resident service and business service. So there will be one line of communication for residents or businesses in Roswell to call. We will manage that internally, whether it's a resident or whether it's a business. So we're trying to make it easy for folks. And some of this will come up, like, hey, they charge me for such and such. What's that about? We'll have the apparatus internally from a supports team to be able to answer people's questions, or if there's something that needs to be followed up, or directed internally to the city. But a perfect example, and I'll just use this, and repetition is the mother of skill. 2 years ago, when we began the zero-based budgeting process, we began the structure of evaluating fee structures in the city, as you remember, Christine. And so we started with the simplistic part, was just look at, like, all right, there's basically on the business tax side, if you will. We looked at it and said, where are we and where are our sister cities? And we realized that we were in a tremendous deficit from what we were charging versus our sister cities. So we made a very simple stratagem to say, we're going to go to the low to median on almost all values. And by the way, business taxation is very complicated. It's got federal codes in it, so it's hard to make it always apples to apples, a lot of times apples to oranges. But our strategy was, let's at least get here in the short term on the low to medium side of where our sister cities are on business taxes. And so basically, most of this is going to be either business, there'll be some residential taxes, obviously, here on the fire side, and on the Wells and Com side. But the stratagem is basically to meet where our sister cities are. There are a few exceptions to that, and we've talked about those and haven't talked about those again. But the overwhelming majority we are meeting the lowest threshold of our sister cities. Councilor Hall.
And I just like the fact that you're giving an option for expedited fees. So if somebody does want that extra level, they can opt in for that.
And Brian, let me ask this, we bring Amanda as well. Fire department now works in conjunction with ComDev, which is all under the direction of economic development in terms of speed, right? And making sure we are acting as we are satisfying our business interests in our city.
And the expedited services are not figured into any of the revenue. They are icing on the cake. So if they want the service, they're paying for the service. So we don't calculate any of that as revenue.
Council, any other thoughts, comments, or Councilor Sells?
Just, moving from a model where costs for these kinds of things are sort of borne generally to a model where costs are much more aligned with the use drives efficiency in the department. I mean, as we talk about, we're going to talk in parking and sort of in the same vein. This is a clear strategy that we're moving towards tying charges to services and taking out of the gray mass and putting it into specific uses.
Alan, thanks for bringing that up. We may talk about this a little bit tonight on the shared services model, which will begin in 2025 in earnest in the city. There's still a lot to be worked out in shared services. This is a part of it. It's a very preliminary part of it. But the shared services model is a way of bringing efficiency, reducing costs, enhancing services throughout the city and taking out redundancy. And we're in our early phases of that, quite frankly. Council, thank you. If there are no other thoughts, comments, or questions. Chief Wolf, thank you, sir, for your work. As always, we appreciate you, and we're tickled Roswell stole two great people from Gwinnett County. Dr. Menino, thank you, sir, as always. Appreciate your leadership.
Thank you.
All right, next, the third item in the work session is proposed community development department fees. To be presented by our community development director, Michelle Alexander. I think she's accompanied by our deputy community development director, Jackie Geibel. Jackie just arrived in the city a couple of weeks ago. She's brand new.
Right.
She doesn't know much about what's going on.
You look familiar.
Right? Yeah. Right. That would be a good thing.
Is that a speaker? Is it capturing me?
It
evening, Mayor, Council. We're going to walk through the method and the rationale and then next steps for the proposal you have before you to increase a lot of the fees in the Comm Dev department. These have to do with the 3 sets in your packet are for planning and zoning, land development, engineering, and building. And as you was just mentioned about the legislation that required as of July 1st that anything for like the building permit fees that we collect have to cover the cost of building, the cost of operations. So one thing I want to share is that we will be looking more with finance, and this has been a joint effort with finance, Lynn, Shiro. We will be trying to track better and understand all of the costs, including some cities, for example, are looking at what it costs for overhead for the building officials and the whole team and staff, and can you get the full amount of costs. We did look at it specifically how to reduce impact on residential, so you'll see that there were no changes for some of the residential fees at all, or if there were some, they were pretty marginal or as minimal as possible, and to really look at the commercial. So the overall rationale was you all had led the charge to look at our fees. You haven't had your fees increased since 2019, so it's the right time to examine that. Finance worked to pull together comparisons for the CommDev operations, so each of the managers can analyze and see how we compare to other cities. That is in your packet. One of the attachments shows you the reference, so you can see who's highest and who's lowest. Guess who's highest? So Alpharetta was really leading the charge, but it wasn't just what is our sister cities and are we where they need to be. The last bullet here about the recommendations, we also did some quick and dirty assumptions about the amount of hours, an average hour, labor cost per hour, and the service itself. So we went through, and as I'll show some of the examples, each one of the line items where we're charging fees and where there's a point of service delivered, what is the cost? And we also looked at what is the cost for. So is the cost for a developer, a business owner, an investor coming in to build a new subdivision, or is the cost for a resident who wants to build a deck? And are they getting what they need from on that cost? So we distinguished and worked to make it reasonable. We also worked across departments. This was definitely all departments on deck coordination, so it was really great, and we appreciate everybody's time. We saw that we were under collecting. This has a little bit to do with your current permitting system. So some of the business analysis that I'm eager to give to you, we won't be able to for a few months till we get that new permitting system up and running. And we made some corrections already. So you're going to be getting more revenue per each building permit just because of the audit that we did as we went through this exercise. So your chief building official came in and first thing he said was, does this look right? And he went through some of the numbers. So we caught some, and thank you to the Munis team, to IT in helping us make those corrections even before you consider these increases. And I wanted to, excuse me that it's fuzzy like that, but what I wanted to show with this was each step is a touch in the process. And it isn't that, and it's because construction is complex. So as construction comes in, and the person who takes it in can take between 10 minutes to 40 minutes just taking something in, depending on the complexity and scope. And as it goes through each step of the way of a review, an approval, and then the various inspections, all of these are dependent on the quality of the person submitting, the quality of the applicant. And so your Roswell team has been very used to giving it all, hours helping some of these applicants. And in a way, then that means if it's from your general fund, that means that every taxpayer is sort of subsidizing this great service of trying to help that engineer get it right, who just can't get it right and has to resubmit and they're not getting it right, the designer or the architect. So that balance, right, that tension between superior service and excellent service and being efficient and good stewards of our time, because it's the taxpayers' time and dollars. So that's where some of the fees, where we balanced out between we want to be the lowest and the most business friendliest, and we want to be the most efficient and accountable for, what end of who is our applicant. So I'm showing you those two different workflows because each one of those boxes represents hours of labor. So there's a touch. So you have some reference about the approval process and the complexity of how many professionals touch one application. So that was sort of that background. What you have in your packets are 3 sets of increases proposed. This is just page 1 of the engineering, the LDP and the engineering. There were some where we struck through the way it's organized. On the green column is our current fees, and we struck through where we made changes and show you the new one. And sometimes we didn't make any changes. So when you, where you have, I apologize, where's my arrow? It's down here where it says the application fee, where we have the revision fee. So it says 150, it's still 150. So that's not changed. That remains the same. But some places where you see it struck through and there's a new dollar amount proposed. So we reviewed each one of those. So when I mentioned about looking at the labor and what's it really cost, what's it really taken, how many of us are touching it, that's where we aligned that, looked at what our neighbors were doing, and came up somewhere in the middle. An example, Alpharetta had a very high charge on their cubic liters per, cubic volume per liter. Their stormwater detention was really excessive compared to ours. And we didn't just adopt it wholesale, we reduced it, because once we did some math and we were like, holy cow, that was gonna be $70,000 for this one thing that currently we're only charging about $12,000. Yes, it needs to increase, but we don't have to be Alpharetta. So we didn't take it wholesale, is what I'm trying to explain of how we went through it. So it was very much art, not science, but we had basis in the rationale behind it. And some of the examples of where we increased just the baseline application and the baseline land disturbance per acre disturbed, and then also the inspections, the cost per inspection, we were very, very low prior. Building, so the biggest change here was a consolidation. So that state law we talked about where we have to show and be accountable that we're spending permit dollar fees on permit, also said we had to split it up so that you go from 0 to 75,000. So anything in that value range, if a project, the cost of that construction project is less than 75,000, then we have one set of fees for that. Anything that's greater than that, we have another set of fees. And so it's still using a multiplier, but we have to show and be able to have it, if we were audited, to show that price relates to our cost. And we were doing that as we went through, so we have that documentation. I don't know if you had specific questions as we go through any of these. We have one of the big costs, the pre-construction meeting. So right now we have a great service. It's a wonderful service to have all the professionals, our architects, all the engineers, stormwater, fire marshal, zoning. We're all at the table when an applicant comes in. So it's a pre-application. And it's really important and it really helps. We want success. We want one submittal if possible, one review. That's our goal. But when you count out, if you have 12 professionals in that meeting and you spend an hour with one, just even simple math at $100 an hour, and we're less than that, our fee, we weren't charging anything for that. So this way, they'll hopefully value it more, and you'll start getting, we'll start recouping some of those costs. Zoning, similar, we were just increasing
Can
some
I
of
ask
the.
you one quick question
Please.
before you? Does this 75,000 and over and under, does that preempt all of the fees? In other words, you've got these individual fees. Is that? I'm not sure I understand.
Yeah, thank you, because it's layered. So there's several components to it. That's the base permit fee. There is separate fees for review and separate fees for inspection. So this is the main fee as it currently is today. We have that same today. You actually still have that, several layers. So for example, I paid $25 just to submit an application because it's taking time to even process it and tell me if I did it right or wrong. But the main fee to receive a permit and is that based on the valuation. And then we have separate fees for reviews.
Okay, so let me play it back to you.
Yep,
You're saying that if they buy it a la carte, they're on the a la carte menu, which was the previous, but if they're doing a large project, then you just apply this to their building costs and that subsumes all the fees? Is that the way you're saying it?
It does not. So it is one of several fees. It's just that now we have a
I
new
see.
method of doing the valuation.
I see.
Yeah, and I have the rest of the table at the end of the slides, and I can show you some examples. I didn't know if we wanted to go in depth, but it is complex in that there's layers. And the way this is formatted, I just also want to show you, we have a better way to format so that the applicant can follow a lot better. This is really for making the amendment. Zoning, just some of the changes you see there. Like we added the new one with the massage conditional uses. This is labor time going into the specific business, so there's a new fee for that. We weren't charging before for revisions. A site plan would come in and you might spend, 12 hours reviewing and working with an applicant to bring it to council, and we never charged for that. So those are some of the new fees. That's really the bulk of what I wanted to just show, that there was the rationale, and then there are layers to each one of them, and we were trying to balance the tension between great service and business friendly, and also recovering the cost that when it is an investor, developer, or a builder.
Well, Director Michelle Alexander, I can tell you, I'm so glad you're a part of the city. I'm so glad you came to work for us, and your leadership and what you brought to community development. And with that, the promotion of Jackie Divo, who's been here a couple of weeks, to be the assistant ComDev director.
A couple of
It's
weeks
been-
plus a lot of years.
Couple of weeks. It's been just great for the city, and I thank you for your leadership, your insight, your experience, and what you're doing with community development. Thank you very much, ladies, for your work. You're great professionals. Any thoughts, comments, or questions from council? Being that they're not, we thank you very much for your presentation. Next is number 4 is the proposed environmental public works department fees by the public works director, Mr. Brian Watson. Welcome, Brian.
Good evening, sir.
Don't let anybody tell you you're on the clock.
No pressure. That's what I was like.
All right. I do feel like a little bit, but anyway, good evening, everybody. So as part of the FY25 budget process, EPW, Environmental Public Works, reevaluated all the fees that are part of the department, not the rates. These are the fees. These are one-time fees that we charge. And where we focused on was the Water Utility Division as well as the Solid Waste Division. In the Water Utility Division, we looked at the meter fees, capacity fees, hydrant rental fees, as well as our bacteria sampling and testing fee. And then in solid waste, we looked at transfer station fees that we would like to add. So it's a lot of text, but I'll walk you through these just because it's kind of complex within the water utility. So for our meter fees, these are charged when there is a new connection to the utility or an increased meter size is requested. These were last updated in 2012, so they're a little bit out of date. And currently the way that it's set up is if you come into the city and you do a meter fee, it's one fee depending on whether or not you're going to do, it's the same fee for a drop-in, a short side, or a long side meter install. And what that means is if there's a meter box that's already there, we just put in a new meter, that's the same as if we have to put a new meter in that's on the same side as our water main. And it's also the same fee as if we put a new meter in on the opposite side of the road as the water main. And what we found is the cost to do those drop-in meters is we're probably recovering our costs fairly well. But once we do a short side or a long side meter, that one fee that's supposed to cover all that, the utility was losing quite a bit of money. So essentially what we did is we took all of the data that we had for many years in the past, and we basically said the right thing to do is to actually separate the meter fees into those 3 different elements, drop-in, short side, and long side. So essentially the increase is to align the utilities cost with current market prices. We're basically just trying to recover our costs. And what that means is for the drop-in meters, there will be no fee change. It's only when we do short side and long side meter installs where we would charge for those types of meters. Capacity fee. So capacity fee is also charged when there is a new connection to the utility or there's an increased meter size. These were last updated in 2016, which corresponded with the new water treatment plant. And basically, similar to the meter fees, we're basically just trying to recover the costs, we're trying to be more in line with the current costs are. So because these are 8 years out of date, we're just bringing these up to 2024 rates. And the fee here is also based on the meter size. So the smaller the meter, it's less, which is where we have a lot of the residential units. And as we get larger into some of the more complex buildings, that's where those fees, that's where we would really want to capture more of the cost that the utility was basically eating. So. The last two under the water utility division, the hydrant rental fee. So essentially this is like when somebody wants to tap into one of our hydrants for short term. You know, they're maybe doing a construction job, so they hook up a hose, provide it for their construction job, and then when they're done, they disconnect. Well, basically, there's a lot of labor for our folks to go out, make sure that they connect it right. There's also time that finance has to charge and just making sure that all the paperwork is followed. So really all we're asking for is to recover an administrative fee, which is $100, to make sure that any time we have a hydrant rental occur, that we're just recovering those costs. And the last one under the water utility is bacteria sampling and testing, or BACT sampling. This is a new fee. The utility actually used to not charge for this when the water treatment plant had a lab. But as the process over the last couple of years, we noticed that it's much more efficient to not have a lab and actually to contract that service out. So our water utility has basically closed down our lab, and when we have a bacteria sample that we need to take, we send it out to a third party. And that costs the utility just about $200. And so this fee is basically just to recover the costs of what the utility incurs. So the four fees that the water utility is proposing upgrades are the meter fees, capacity, the hydrant rental, as well as the BACT sampling. Solid waste, the transfer station fee. So this is exciting. Sorry, solid waste can be an exciting thing, and we're about to
Agreed.
get people excited. So just a little bit of a background. So the new transfer station expansion was completed mid-24. So basically it tripled the size of our transfer station capacity, which we're very excited about. And then within the last month, we've actually had new software that's been installed so that we can actually process people who are coming through the transfer station more efficiently. So now that we have those in place, in combination with a goal that our department has set that is also part of one of the larger city goals, is to expand our transfer station operations because we have the capacity. There's two fees, or fee structures, if you will, that we are proposing. The first is construction debris. This is very, very exciting, and I know that the former director, Sharon Nice, I've got to call her out because she is super excited about this, as I am. If you go to the transfer station right now, you cannot bring construction debris because our permit does not allow construction debris to be actually brought to the transfer station. So we're actually going to have new dumpsters that are going to be at the transfer station, and both residents and non-residents can come there, drop off their construction debris, and we will charge on a per ton basis. So we're proposing that for both residents and non-residents. The last bullet there is a transfer station disposal fee for non-residents. So right now, residents can come use our transfer station, but we also have a lot of non-residents that call up, and there's really not a good local transfer station in this area. And ours is not only the largest with the most capacity, it's very convenient to a lot of cities. So what we're proposing is a fee structure based on items, so like chairs and sofas and different items that non-residents would bring, and that we would charge based on those different items. And we think that this is another way that we can help recoup some of the costs that the solid waste division incurs for just operating the transfer station overall. And with that, I'll take any questions that
Brian, thank you. I can't think of a better man to be consequentially intimate with solid waste other than yourself.
Yes, sir.
This is a perfect example underneath Mr. Knight's leadership, the directive to take to change the one-size-fits-all approach that often happens in bureaucracies and in governments, but even at the local side, and coming up with dynamic answers to questions. The other one is to begin to say, and we've caught this sometimes with some issues where the city was doing services, whether it was fire fees or ComDev fees or public work fees, and those fees were not being charged or charged in an adequate nature. The city was absorbing the cost, and by definition, that means the taxpayer, the resident of Roswell, in the businesses of Roswell who are paying taxes are absorbing that cost. So part of this is to take that one-size-fits-all approach, become transparent with all the structure of what the fees look like, and then charge appropriately to recover costs so that we're not subsidizing costs to all the residents, but unique to the situation where the application is merited. Ryan, appreciate your leadership in Public Works. Does council have any thoughts? Yes, ma'am. Councilmember Beasley.
I too love solid waste, but with that, I do have a question related to it. I see the transfer station disposal proposed for fee schedule for non-residents. Will it remain at no additional cost for residents, the same way the recycling program is done, or is this including large scale, because you mentioned furniture items, will there be fees charged to residents as well?
Yeah, great question. Currently, there are 2 fees that are charged to residents, chairs and recliners. I know that's kind of awkward, but we would get a lot of chairs and recliners, and those are the only fees that residents incur right now at the transfer station. There would be no other fees or proposed for residents.
Okay.
This would only be for non-residents, which would also include, by the way, municipal solid waste. So we actually have a fee there for a bag of trash, right? As well as the other different items like furniture. And I think the largest fee is $20. I think that's the per item. So it's a $3 to $20 fee for non-resident per night.
And that came across there because Councilman Workland was taking a lot of old furniture. So we had to do something
wife
about
got
it.
rid of it.
Those tires that you were.
Alabama recliner.
The Alabama recliner system. To answer your question, no charge and fee structure for the Roswell residents, period. But there are 3 fees already currently in existence at the transfer station where Roswell residents do in fact pay. So thank you for that question. Thoughts, comments, questions from council? Director Watson, as always, thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate the great work that you do. Thank you, brother. All right, the last item on the work session, which we have left at least 3 minutes for. And obviously, there's not a lot of discussion around this item, so this will probably just go bam, bam. Is the parking plan analysis discussion is presented by our Deputy City Administrator, Mr. Jeff Leatherman, and Peter Sorkoff of Sear World. Welcome, Jeff. Welcome, Peter.
Thank you, sir. And again, just in kind of my opening comments, it certainly is a pleasure to be here and hear, from the team before me, all the great work that has been done on our fees, but also within the budget process. It's great to be here to be a part of this conversation as it relates to parking, something that we've been working on for quite some time. I'm going to run through a handful of slides, of course, if there's questions. And on the outset, just want to thank Peter and his team from Sear World. The work that they've done and the analysis that they have done has truly set us up for a very successful conversation around modeling and around the fee structures that we do currently have from 2018, as well as the recommendations that we have moving forward as part of our overall, not only parking strategy, but also our economic development strategy. What we're going to be talking about tonight is reviewing the recommendation for expanding parking services. We will have some follow-on information coming into January as we digest the information in the report provided by SEER. We'll be moving through some additional recommendations on some policy changes and adjustments that we'll need to bring forward in January. So I just wanted to set the stage that really what we're talking about is what's contained in the report today, and then what additional work we may have over the coming couple of weeks. We'll include some ordinance updates and some policy changes as we move forward in the implementation of the recommendations for the report. In the parking services study, we really tackled, there's a lot of issues that we tackled in there, but I boiled it down really into 7 main kind of functional points. We tackled the evaluation of the existing inventory and how that's changed over the last 5 and 6 years, the opportunities for leveraging parking as an economic development tool, the implementation and operational strategy that we would recommend, also evaluating other cities surrounding us as a model for potential implementation, and then going beyond just our surrounding cities is what are the best practices that we see in the municipal parking business. Technology is constantly evolving in this space. I can think back to the early installations that I did even 10 and 15 years ago of parking space stations, and they were large and clunky, and the mobile devices didn't even exist at that time, and we've seen a significant change in technology even just in the last decade. And then developing policy ordinances and pricing recommendations to expand the existing parking services model that was implemented and started in 2018. So this isn't anything new necessarily for the city of Roswell, for our downtown area, but we are taking a very active approach, as you've heard earlier, of how we're looking at our overall fee structures, how are we looking at all of our operational models within the city of Roswell, and the parking services is one of those elements that we tackled in this last budget year. I thought it would be appropriate that we need to remind ourselves in all of these conversations that we are truly driven by an economic development strategy, and that strategy has a lot of opportunities in it. We have broken down, and through the work that Peter and his team has done, the downtown area, the midtown area, uptown, and the east side. Those are all components of our economic development strategy, and it is bound and limited, and in some cases I would say restricted by everything that you see in blue on this map. Everything that you see in blue on this map, dark blue, really dark blue, and light blue, are all of our residential neighborhoods within our community. And so as you start to strip out the residential neighborhoods in our community, you see the commercial areas that we are working with. And as I talked about in October, it's roughly about 15% of our overall city geography that we are working with from an economic development strategy. It goes to speak to how difficult some of these processes are to develop an economic development strategy within a very finite landmass that we're working with, really built around the corridors that you see in the city. So as we talk about the tax allocation district, or the TAD that we passed earlier as an economic development tool earlier this year, you can see how that starts to line up with this map and where we're focusing our time, attention, and energy on. And the parking services is another element and another tool in our toolbox for that process. I like to show this just because it starts to show some of the breakdown, but again, the established residential area is about 78%, roughly 15% of our commercial corridor is available, and it's driven by this question: how are we developing the right property, sales, and business tax model for the city of Roswell now and into the future? And this continues to be the drivers for our economic development strategy. And again, you'll hear me say this over and over again, our parking strategy is another component of our economic development strategy. Shared parking services creates economic development opportunities. This is not the downtown area that we've been focused on in the study, but this is one of our key intersections in and around Highway 9, Holcomb Bridge Road, and East Crossville. You can see areas that are potentially ripe for redevelopment are going to have a significant amount of challenges. There's a lot of asphalt in this area that we're going to have to be challenged with, because as we see now, what we didn't have 4 years ago was a significant amount of stormwater requirements, a significant amount of transportation requirements that weren't in place during the time when these developments were constructed that are in place now. And so as we think about the different tools that we need, we can't afford, frankly, to have a sea of asphalt parking in our redevelopment strategy now or into the future. We're going to have to come up with a better model. And this is just the first step in understanding the overall model that we'll be putting forward. So in the study, you'll see kind of these, I would say, four major bullet points. In 2018, the mayor and council approved the parking program in the downtown on Canton Street and Elizabeth Way. Enforcement authority wasn't really granted at the time. It was essentially on the honor system. We do have voluntary compliance, roughly about 30% of the total available parking. And I've said it a couple of times, I walked down, or I was there on Canton Street actually last night before we were picking the kids up for something they were doing. And we were well over 30% occupied on Canton Street and Elizabeth Way in those parking areas. It's estimated from our friends and partners at Roswell Inc. that about 70% of our visitors in the downtown area are from outside of the city of Roswell. So that is a building block that we see within our parking evaluation for how we leverage this now and into the future as a tool. This is a remodel of the 2018 downtown pricing inventory. You see kind of the $1, the $1.33, the $1.50, all the way to $16 for different durations of time. Depending on how you equate that, that's about $1 an hour all the way up. If you're at 5 hours, you're roughly paying $3.20 an hour for parking at the far end of that model. And then we've added some additional parking in the West Alley lot, Green Street lot since 2018. Those are currently available at no charge as part of our existing structure for the city right now. Also wanted to just take a moment and talk a little bit about the constraints that we talked in the parking study, and that Peter and his team helped us to understand, and as well as our community development team. And thanks for Jackie and her team to unpack some of the history around policies within their downtown corridor. And it's a little fuzzy, so I'll do some explanation here, but everything that you see in green, and the list is there, is essentially an exempt parking business in the downtown area, either completely exempt or partially exempt from parking requirements normally required in the code. So in the city of Roswell, if you were to build a restaurant, if you were to build a commercial area or open one up, you would have certain parking requirements for that business. Well, everybody in green either has limited parking requirements or no parking requirements at all. And we've done that by code. That's by allowance in the city of Roswell, when we were using parking as an economic development tool, essentially waiving that parking requirement so that businesses could open up and thrive in our downtown area. The risk that we'll see, and I'll talk about it on the next slide, is what I see everything in blue. Those are the private parking lots that are currently available to members that are visiting our downtown area that are paying for parking in private lots in and around our downtown area. Those lots, and I've kind of got it outlined here, essentially represent 512 parking spaces that, from my view, should be considered at risk in our downtown area. Those lots could go into redevelopment at any time that the owner decided to place those lots in a redevelopment strategy. And we could potentially lose those parking and that parking capacity that's currently being used in the private sector to business development, redevelopment, or the private sector itself. And so from a business perspective, and I think from a city perspective, we need to take on the challenge, and we have, of how are we managing parking to support our businesses in and around our downtown corridor. That's essentially the basis for why we started to work through with Peter and his team the support around parking and how we're going to optimize this model for us in the future. I'll stop there. Yes, sir.
I can't get my mic on, but I do have a question, and that is, on that slide, do you have any idea how big a deficit is created against the current requirements? Do we know how much we're underparked with the green in particular?
We did do some of that analysis. I don't know it off the top of my head, and if we can't get it before our meeting tonight, we'll pull that. Jackie, did we do that as part of our? I just don't remember what it was on the.
Take a look at the sheet. I'm
Yeah,
not sure.
well, we can get that answer for you so that we have a better understanding as we go through. Thanks for the question. I want to transition now into the recommendations that we have within the parking model. And what you're going to see on the next group of slides is the actual physical model that we put together in conjunction with the parking recommendations. Again, Peter and his team, a ton of research and how we can optimize parking as a service throughout the city of Roswell. Up in the upper left-hand corner, that is a map that is also within the report itself that represents the different areas in the city that are available for parking now. And the items that are in red are essentially the city-controlled parking locations. In the grid down here in Table 2, it represents essentially 837 spaces that I will say are essentially owned and protected by the city of Roswell, meaning that they're parking lots that we own or they're on-street parking that we maintain. The additional 108 spaces at the West Alley lot and the Green Street lot at 66 spaces are currently under our control. We manage those spaces, but are considered, for some cases, they could be at risk because we could take those properties under redevelopment in the future. We do not own them. All in total, that number is important of 1,011 spaces. Essentially, the model is built off of the available parking of 1,011 spaces in our downtown corridor. And the maps are represented in pages 166 to 182. You can see all the detailed maps of that. So that's the basis in which we're working for all of the next screenshots that you'll see moving forward. You'll see this model in a couple of slides moving forward, so I just want to walk us through it. Is what you see in the first green block is the prime hours. That's essentially the hours that would be available for charging for parking on any given day in these different locations. The percentage of utilization is the utilization rate of those 12 hours, and then the average or the daily rate that is proposed. And we'll talk about the dynamic model in a moment for this model. There's also a couple of assumptions in the Woodstock Soccer Complex. You'll see those highlighted a couple of times in the model. We are assuming no revenue at this point in time in this first year related to the Woodstock Soccer Complex. I think there's some additional conversations I know the council has wanted to have around that and the operation associated with it. And so we've essentially assumed zero revenue out of those parking lots as we move forward in your recommendations for the budget in 2025. You'll also see the Green Street lot and the West Alley lot highlighted in that pink and purple. I just want to continue to remind ourselves that those are parking lots that we do not own and we may not control forever. And so we need to take that into account now and into the future as we understand parking today and next year and the year after. Our current model of the $2.2 million that is anticipated in your budget for fiscal year 25 assumes this conservative utilization rate. And I will also show you a little bit later the maximum utilization rate. And for the rest of this, we'll move pretty quickly, but you see the weekday rate, and then this is the weekend rate. Takes up our percent utilization to about 70% in most areas with the exception of City Hall. City Hall we've listed at 10%. As we know right now, City Hall currently is fairly, I would say, underutilized from a parking capacity perspective, weekdays and weekends. And so we've assumed a very conservative approach in our overall budget estimates for City Hall itself. We do anticipate that to change with some conversations that we're going to have later tonight at the council as we start to see redevelopment in and around City Hall moving forward. And then we also have events for 2025. We assume 5 events per year. We have included the Woodstock Soccer Complex as an event structure. It's a fairly nominal amount, roughly about $4,000 or $5,000 over the course of the entire year. And so depending on the policies and decisions that you all make regarding the Woodstock Soccer Complex, we may or may not count on that revenue moving forward, but again, it's fairly nominal. We have assumed the City Hall lot being full as part of our special event strategy. Again, this is representative of 5 days out of the year, so a fairly nominal amount, total of about $50,000 out of the $2.2 million. As we start to think about cash flow and net revenue, we have built in the implementation. This is bringing in all the technology and additional signs and infrastructure that we would need, and an operating budget of roughly about $800,000 or so gives you your cash flow and your gross revenue associated with the net revenue that you can see. You'll see that a couple more times, and I'm just watching the clock. So again, as I summarize, with a small capital investment of about $300,000, operating investment $500,000 to $800,000, we can activate the existing infrastructure. And the bottom bullet point is really important. This does not include any revenue from the future parking deck. Not assuming any of that. Estimated first year revenue assumes a dynamic pricing model with the current hourly rate between $1 and $2 per hour, with a conservative weekday rate of 40% and a weekend occupancy rate of 70%. Gets us the $2.2 million. Sorry, one other thing. Just as I think an identifier, the net revenue for 1 year will equal to about or greater the total annual payments for the parking deck bond that's authorized by the voters. I just wanted to identify that. It's not that we're committing that payment, but we did want to identify that there is that opportunity there.
And that 2.2 also was built on ramping up in the middle of the year. That's not.
Yes, sir. You'll see those projections here in just a minute. So that's based off of a conservative approach. You're going to see the same grid, but this is our maximum performance. So it takes up certain lots within, or certain areas of parking within the weekday performance. So you can imagine things closer to our downtown core, the utilization rate goes up, pricing stays the same, and you start to see more revenue generated because Canton and Street and Elizabeth Way, instead of being 40% in our conservative model, are represented at 90% utilization rate in our more aggressive model. The weekend rate also takes on that same approach. We still have kept City Hall and the Cultural Arts Center low at 20% utilization in this model. But again, the downtown core, Canton Street, Elizabeth Way, Park Square, East Alley lot, a much more aggressive 90% occupancy on the maximum percentage basis. And this is our special event model as well. To the mayor's point, let me jump into kind of the implementation plan. Assumes the first quarter of fiscal year 25, we bring in a phased-in approach. 7% is kind of the easy one to get to. Canton Street, Elizabeth Way, cleaning up our existing model right now in January. We start to move on to the on-street parking because the infrastructure is already in place, not a lot of work to do other than technology improvements. That gets us to 27% on board. In March, we're at 45%, bringing on West Alley and Green Street. And then in April, we're at 100% with the City Hall lots, the Cultural Arts Center, Woodstock. Again, my qualifier around Woodstock, that would be the last thing that we have a conversation about within the model. This is just the same representation of that same information that we looked at January, February, March, April as the phase-in of the technology and the infrastructure improvements. And then we start to look at monthly revenue projections. And to the mayor's point, the model also takes into account that as we ramp up, our monthly revenue projections are also on the same scale of that ramp up. And so in January, we slowly ramp up, and then in June and July, we're looking for optimal performance out of the entire model to get us to the $2.2 million. And so we see the ramp up really in the first 6 months, and then it starts to peak its effectiveness and efficiency in July of fiscal year 25. This is another way that you can see the total revenue projections. You start very slow in our movement, and then you start to really see the optimization model coming in June and July as we get everything up to speed, the policies in place, and the work done so that we hit those revenue projections of $2.2 million. Again, just as a reminder, and this is my last slide, December work session is about understanding the work that the SEER group has put forward, and then we have some cleanup work that we need to do to continue the work from 2018, some additional policies that will need to be put in place, and some additional ordinance recommendations that we'll bring forward in January to make sure that we're clean and ready to go for all of the implementation strategy in the first quarter of 2025. I'm going to stop there and offer any questions you may have, and then also allow Peter to any other secondary comments.
Well done, Jeff Leatherman, Deputy City Administrator. Outstanding work on this project. Thank you, Peter, for your work on this project. Does council have any thoughts, comments, or questions on the, yes, sir.
Can you go back to the spreadsheet of the utilization, the maximum performance for weekday? We'll do weekdays. Well, weekend's fine. I don't care. Pick one. So these are conservative models that you're saying for these?
No, the conservative model was implemented in representing the $2.2 million. So the conservative model is here. Here's weekday, comparatively speaking, essentially everything's set at 40% with the exception of City Hall at 10%.
Got it. Color me skeptical. I'll use Forest Street as an example. 40% of 12 hours of full utilization on a weekday. I parked on Forest Street today to go to Heart and Soul for lunch. Your girl didn't have to parallel park her minivan because I just cruised on in there. I had a 5-space landing zone. I had no problems with the bike rack. If that's how it is currently on a day where that's part of your 40% utilization for weekdays, I can't imagine that that's going to increase demand based off of using a paid model. This was a free model. Same with City Hall, 40% of weekday utilization for 12 hours a week. We're fully utilized for 12 hours. We're staff. Are we charging staff? I guess I'm just trying to better understand the model approach using this prime hours. I'm assuming that means the prime hours are 12 hours, correct?
So City Hall, as you see at the top, actually is a prime hour of 4. So it assumes that after City Hall closes down, it's the evening hours associated with City Hall.
Got it.
So the model
With
assumes
a
only a
10%
4 hours.
with 10%.
And a 10% utilization rate of those 4 hours.
So it's still 50 parking spaces after 5 p.m. on a Monday when half of Canton Street's closed.
Yes.
I don't know if I go with the word conservative for that, but I hear you. And then does that begs the question as well, are we going to be charging for people to come to City Hall for council meetings? Because that's part of your 4-hour model.
And so as we start to take on the fee structure and the dynamic pricing model, those would be the policy decisions that we're bringing forward in January to make sure that we have clarity on how are we implementing the fee structure and the policy associated to answer those questions. We didn't want to try to tackle it now. We wanted to make sure that everybody understood the overall business model that we're putting forward. We are representing that essentially there's an average hourly rate that has been placed into the model so that we can understand the forecasting. There's also the potential where we're at less than $1.56 an hour, or different models that we could put in place. And if we want to go into more detail, I can also kick over to Peter and he can talk a little bit about the dynamic pricing model and functionally how that will work moving forward. Because some of it is a test and tell model so that as we start to test pricing and demand, we can drive at where we place the model and the emphasis on the model and where we're going to see pricing demand grow. If based on everything that I've seen from Roswell Inc., and we see an average of about 120 minutes, maybe 140 minutes that people are staying on Canton Street. Well, if I'm parked in the private lot, I'm paying $5 an hour to park. Right now, we're looking at $1.50 to $2 range that we're looking at within our own model, much cheaper than what the private lots are paying for right now. And that's where we're looking at, okay, how do we split hairs around the right dynamic pricing model to move this forward for not only protection of the business, but optimization of the service.
And this is a workshop, so you'll be determining the policy for the city on all of these issues.
I realize too that we have conversations to come. You said January, February, we'll actually be setting the policies for what the dynamic pricing model will be. I guess because we're about to head in 5 minutes into a council meeting where we are looking at $2.2 million of recognized revenue in a budget. So that's really just where my questions lie, of trying to suss out how conservative that $2.2 million projection is, especially based off of, I spent a lot of time with the analysis document. Obviously, there's the 250 some odd page full document, but the much shorter analysis document that outlines several data limitations. I think it's page 6 said that the data is limited. There's not enough parking information for a majority of lots and spaces, and so it was just utilizing what we have right now for Park Mobile, which is obviously quite limited. You had previously discussed that. I guess that's my last question too, just trying to get a better idea of how conservative this is. Jeff, you said that voluntary compliance is currently at 30%, but the analysis document said that about 13% of visitors did not pay for parking at Park Mobile. Where Park Mobile is used, that's on page 8. That would be 87% compliance. So where's the 30% come from?
So if you look at the data that we have available to us right now, which I think we've been pretty open about how flawed it is.
Oh, it doesn't?
Yeah.
Sorry.
I don't even know if these are actually, yeah, not sure.
Broadcasting.
They're ornamental.
Oh, they're outside, not inside. Okay, so they can hear us out here, but we can hear each other. Okay.
I think, look, the data is very flawed, and we know that, and I think part of what we're building here is essentially a working hypothesis of where we think we should be. On the conservative side, effectively what we saw from the data, which, by the way, again, I want to keep coming back to, we're making assumptions about the data, because the number one assumption is that with 20% absorption on weekdays and 30% on weekends, we know anecdotally, and I'll just use what you shared previously on Forest in reverse, if we were to walk out to Canton on a Friday night, not only is it jam-packed and there's not a single space, you have people just driving around in circles waiting for a space. So that's the inverse of your Forest Street story, right? I think what you know with 20 and 30% uptake rate, and then anecdotally full on Thursday nights, Friday nights, Saturday during the day, is 70 or 80%, but we don't really know for sure because the data is so limited that you can make the assumption those people are using the spaces, not using the app, and not paying. So really only 20 to 30%, and those are pretty broad numbers because again, if you look at Park Mobile and how the data was structured previously, like they round up to the minute or down to the minute, but they can't tell us what the rounding error is. Meaning they can't tell us if at 1:01 they round to 1 minute or they round up to 2 minutes. That's how flawed the data is, okay? We also only have data on 71 spaces. So we're also making some assumptions based on how those 71 spaces are operating, again, with no enforcement and trying not to be anecdotal about how busy they are, because you could certainly make the case in reverse as you did earlier. But you have to basically build a baseline model to start with, and as quickly as we can get parking online and some form of enforcement, even if that doesn't mean necessarily a ticket, because all you're trying to do is condition new behavior, then you're collecting data to actually look at how does each spot in inventory actually work. And I think with variable pricing, what you're really trying to look at is day of week, right? You're looking at time of day. You're also looking at proximity to a point of interest, which is very, very important because people are willing to pay more to be closer to the place that they want to go to, right? That's a known commodity. And then at the end of the day, you can sit back and start to rework this analysis so that you have something much, much more realistic to forecast from. But I think in the absence of that, you're using flawed data to get a baseline to start with. And I don't really think you have any options other than that based on the data that came to us and what we saw. Does that help?
Yes, and I realize obviously that we'll be delving into the actual policy itself much later. We'll actually get into what the variable option would be, and where we're actually targeting paid parking. Like I said, just trying to nail down some assumptions before we go into budget.
Yeah.
And
And again, not to be crazy about it, but, you know, if the market told you they're willing to pay $10 an hour to park on Elizabeth Way, to be that close to a restaurant,
oh, people pay 20 at the antique lot.
absolutely. So Forest is gonna suffer right now because, you know, by the variables I just put forward, it's not really close to a point of interest in any sort of meaningful way. But what we also know is you have a local car broker who parks his inventory on that street 24 hours a day, and that's how he sells cars from those parking spots, okay? So we're not trying to like kick him out, either he pays for it or he doesn't park there anymore, so that inventory actually becomes available and productive.
Right. Thank you.
Would you go back to the one with the EBITDA slide?
Sorry, which
Was the EBITDA slide where you,
Yeah.
probability?
Here?
Yeah, there you go.
Yep.
Yeah, so let's talk about what's at risk in the budget. So net is 962, but some of that, so we would spend 470 up front.
Yes.
Is that a fair statement?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then the OpEx are over the course of the year. So if this flames out, we may be at risk in the budget, some number, but it's not 2.2.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Council, thank you. Any other thoughts or questions for Peter or Jeff? Yes, sir. Sarah?
Just a quick point of clarification. I understand your point in terms of what we would flame out and not be at risk at with the 2.2 as it relates to the initial investment. But the 2.2 is needed to balance our budget. So that's really the larger question of why I want to confirm that
The
dollar.
expenses are also in the balanced budget.
Totally
Okay,
understand.
so to the
400.
extent that you avoid expenses, you're also adding to the balance question, right?
Yeah.
You're improving the balance. So that's the only point I'm making is, look, if we find out we are just completely full of crap, we can recorrect, or we can put, as you say, you can put your attention on those spots that are most dear. As you know, there are times where we can pay somebody to stand out there and hand tickets and make plenty of money off some of these spots at some point.
In particular, that's why the special events component is there, because those are opportunities for exactly what you just shared.
Thank you.
All right, any other thoughts, questions? We have,
Here's a minute.
Jeff and Peter, thank you so much. If there are no other thoughts, comments, or questions, I thank everyone for their time. I'll see you next door. This work session is adjourned.
Mayor.